Alright guys, so we decided copying vanilla assets and changing them around and doing things wasn't good enough. We need to start changing meshes. We want to bring in our own build pieces, our own walls. So we found this one. It's kind of a bundle of game objects that are all in one FBX. So I've already downloaded it, but if you download it, it's going to prompt you, make sure you have an account and you're signed in. We got two folders, source and textures. So I'm going to go into Unity, and in my custom items, I created a folder called Pieces. I'm going to highlight my source and textures, and I'm just going to drag it in. Alrighty, so we got a nice little prompt saying that material is using the texture as a normal map. It must be marked as a normal map. In Blender, typically that would not be an issue. In Unity, it will be. So just click Fix Now. It'll turn everything that was originally just a regular JPEG into an actual normal map, and it'll reference them correctly. So under textures, we have all these textures that we have, the PNGs, whatever. They, as a normal asset rip, they also come in as a 2K max format that you can get with no compression. So make sure that you compress these if you were to create your own build asset, and that's what we're going to do. So in our Sketchfab, it comes in as one gigantic FBX full of different objects. So we're going to choose a nice wall that we can build. We'll choose this wooded wall with two windows because it looks cool. Hit Control D to duplicate. We're going to get an error. Don't worry about it. Create the wooded wall clone inside of your scene with all the references to materials. So we're going to look for stone endings, stone wall, glass, and wood beam. So wood beam is right here. We're going to click that and Control D to duplicate. We needed stone endings as well. We needed stone wall as well. And I believe glass, but I don't see that. Let's see. Let's go back to the wall here. So yeah, it says glass. Oh, it's right here. So duplicate that. So we have all the materials separated out. We do need this wooded wall mesh here, which we can actually click on the clone up here and see that it's going to reference that one. So we're going to duplicate this. So we have all of our materials separated out. We don't have all the texture separated out, but that shouldn't matter because this is a complete custom asset, so we don't really have to do anything other than compress those and make sure that they look fine going into the game. So if you notice, when we hit Control D on the wall itself, we didn't get anything. We only have our materials that we have here, but we do have it shown in scene. In order to turn our FBX into an actual game object, as we drag this and drag it back in. So this is now an object here. This is now a game object referenced in scene. You can delete this from the scene if you want to, and save the scene out. We now have a prefab, or a .prefab, wood wall clone .prefab. We have the mesh, we have a wooden beam, the materials, everything that we need, glass and whatnot. So default, when you clone these do not have anything in the game referenced as scripts. You know, this is a complete asset that we just grabbed off of Sketchfab. It looks nice. It's pretty much exactly what we want. We want to build this wall. So stone wall, stone endings, it's going to reference all of these that are inside of the FBX. Make sure you update these to the duplications. It's going to be a-okay as far as what we need. These will reference all of the textures that come from the textures file and textures folder. So click on the game object. We're actually going to drag this game object, double click on it, open this back up, and then we get these. So stone endings, of course, is going to be replaced with stone endings here. Stone wall going to be replaced with stone wall. Wood beam replaced with wood beam. Glass replaced with glass. So now, when we reference these and we click here, it should reference the ones that are outside of the FBX. This is kind of what we want. Ideally, you would do this for every single game object if you had multiple like this one does in this asset bundle, if you wanted every single one of them. Duplicate out all of your materials. Put these in a materials folder or something to keep yourself organized, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say materials. If I can spell materials. And click, 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 click. and drag. And this one right here is actually the physical mesh that we can see. No textures, no anything, and we see all the Blender lines and vertices and all that. So we're actually going to create a folder for this, and we're going to say meshes. We're going to drag and drop that one in here. You can say prefabs, which most people would do, would say prefabs here, and drag and drop the physical prefab in here. But typically, as mentioned in the past, it's always good to duplicate default game items. So we have all the scripts referenced for us. We have some kind of default assets to set up, so we don't actually have to do that to our prefab itself by ourselves. So what we can do is we're going to say a wall in the game. So this is called a wood wall or windowed wall. We're going to say wood wall. We're going to go find that one, and we're just duplicate it. So we have a wood wall asset here. We're going to go drag that into pieces folder. And as mentioned, we want to swap out the mesh. So we're going to double click this. We have our own name. We're going to say, window stone wall, something like that. Rename the file. So this is now our prefab name. Our piece name and everything is still saying wood wall. I'm going to change that to window stone wall. So I'm going to click in here once to be able to copy that name. And then everything that says wood wall, I'm going to paste. Okay. And we have a workbench. It's already referencing the crafting station. It's got a new worn and broken status on it. Material type is wood. Our wall is stone, so we're obviously going to want that as stone. So the scripts already come attached to it. So the piece script, the ZNet view script, which gets attached to pretty much everything in the game, and a box collider. So the box collider we might have to edit. We might have to change around. The mesh itself, we're going to go ahead and start replacing. So if we open this up, I'm going to hit Alt and click to collapse all those, so when we open, we can go through. So the way the wear and tear script works is the wear and tear script, if you have a new, worn, or broken game object or a status setup, is these actually change based on how much damage the object takes. So if you have new, worn, and broken here, new means that you just freshly placed it. Worn means it's probably taken some rain damage. Broken means it physically broke. All of these have their own LOD groups on it. They have their own meshes. So combined mesh, wood wall, broken. If we go and click that, we can see that there's 3 different meshes here. Worn, new, broken. Due to the fact that we brought in our own asset, it might not have all 3 of these. So you can just remove them. Shouldn't be an issue. That way you can just leave just the new. So worn or broken, we can go into this wear and tear script. We can remove these if we don't care about them. So boom, boom. Worn and broken, we don't care. Wet, we didn't care. We're gonna want to leave new. That way the game knows, hey, this is what it should look like when it's freshly placed. Because we don't care about worn and broken, we can actually delete that to maintain some kind of sanity. Go back to pieces, open this back up, and look at it. So we have the mesh. We want this to look at like our other wall. We don't want vanilla Valheim asset stuff. That's not cool anymore. So we're going to go back to sources, mesh, because we made everything nice and organized. We know exactly where to go. So sources, mesh, and grab, drag and drop. So as you see, the mesh is here, but it looks a little funky. Why does it look funky? Is probably because we don't have the other things set up the way we needed. So we can actually cheat that we want the mesh renderer from the other one. We want the shaders from the other one. So lucky enough, our game object itself, so if we go into source prefabs, our game object itself already has all that stuff set up for and referenced for us, right? So we can cheat. You can click the 3 little dots on the right-hand side, say copy component. Now go back to your mesh inside of this woodstone wall. Don't double click, otherwise this will go away, but we'll go here and then say paste component values. We'll click those 3 dots again. And if you notice, it magically just fixed everything for us. It says, whoa, it looks great. So we have the mesh, we have a nice wooden wall piece, and if you notice, it's sideways. So that's something that you need to keep in mind is when you import a mesh, the mesh doesn't always match the previous mesh. So you might have things that are in different orientation, different rotations, um, maybe a little bit higher as far as the y value. In this case, it is all at 0, 0, 0, but we need to rotate this. So you can actually hover above the x or hover above the y or the z and just quickly rotate this. So you can slide your mouse left and right and see what this does instead of physically typing in the values, and Control Z to undo it. So we can see, this will, open it like a door. We don't want that. So we're going to change the rotation on X. And obviously, rotation is going to need to be negative 90 in this case, because positive 90 will flip it the other way. So this wall itself, if we go and look and we drag this in, the transform is going to be the same as a normal wall, but slightly off. And if you notice when we rotated it, it slightly moved it to the left, so you might want to move this mesh a little bit back to the right to fix those issues. So high detail, we're going to cut this mesh off. We're going to cut on high detail, and we're going to figure out what this is adding. So we see plank, wood, wall, right? It's going to turn on all of these meshes for high detail. And if you notice, the good thing about this is if we shift click all of these, we can turn on all the mesh renderers quickly. So we can actually see the default wall, what it used to look like. So we can actually now turn on our other mesh and figure out, oh shit, this is huge, right? The orientation's wrong. It's not facing the same direction. Let's go ahead and fix a lot of those things. So the mesh, we can either change the size here, which I will do. I'm going to do like a 0.5 on all of these. And this looks about right for the same wall, but I do kind of want this maybe a little bit bigger. The Y rotation is what allowed us to change it here. We're also going to put negative 90 on this one. And we're going to be able to see that if we put this at 0, 0, that it doesn't quite line up. So our 0, 0, 0 on this particular object doesn't mesh very well, right? It is inside of this wall, but it doesn't go all the way down to the ground like it's supposed to. And that is because our mesh is super cool, right? So you can, I'm clicking right click here to be able to look around like this, and I'm hitting WA and SD to float around and kind of fly. And we see that this isn't quite lining up the way we want. We can grab this little gizmo here and line that up as close as we want. And I'm going to put this kind of in the center, so it's similar to what the vanilla Valheim asset would look like, okay? And we don't need this high quality. We don't need a simple mesh combine script, which comes from the default game, combine meshes, so on. That's kind of how the wall would look. And just to guarantee, I'm going to make sure I can hit redo. So redo is going to be Control Y. So we're going to Control Z everything that we just did and guarantee that the wall is actually in this orientation when we look at it. So Control Z, done. And it doesn't look like we can go that far back. We can actually. So that looks fine. This is exactly how we wanted it. So we're going to hit Control Y, and I'm just going to hold it down. I'm going to let it go all the way forward, and we're right back where we were. So snap points. These are really big on build pieces. Snap points are basically transforms. It's where the transforms are going to be. If you notice, these are on all four corners of this wall. So 4 corners, 4 corners, 4 corners. So that means that in vanilla Valheim, it's going to check for these snap points. It's going to figure out where these snap points actually are. So hopefully I set this up correctly. Most of the piece builds that I've done don't require snap points, but just based on how this goes, it looks like it's on all 4 corners of the wall, and we're going to need to stretch that to our mesh, right? So leaving this high quality planks and all this stuff, this gives us good reference of where we need to go and what we need to do. So the first snap point, I'm going to grab this, and it looks like it's dead center straight in the wall. I'm going to extend it as close as I can to the top of my snap point. Grab the next one, same thing. The good thing about these being in the same orientation is I can actually grab the Y value, copy that, go over here, and paste the Y value back in, and they're going to be at the exact same height, okay? That helps us out. So the good thing is we already lined up the bottom, so that should be perfect for these snap points, all right? Should be perfect. So now, unless there is a script in here, 100% that we need for snap points or anything like that, um, we would leave this. If not, we don't. So simple mesh combine is combining these meshes, mesh name, blah, blah, blah. This is if you want any kind of high quality LOD or destroy old colliders, copy target if you're doing anything. I haven't messed with this script a whole lot, so I don't need it. So these are all mesh renderers. We don't need these, okay? So we're going to just delete that. You can right click and delete or just click and then press the delete key. Either way. So large LOD. What the hell? This is the old wall, right? So this is if the wall is nice and big. We're going to click here so we can jump straight to exactly where our mesh is, and we're going to copy this mesh and put it back. And in order to get the same exact transform, we're going to click back on our combined mesh high, click back on this, and say copy component. We're going to click on large LOD, and my bad. I meant to copy the transform. I don't know if I did that. So copy the transform, click on large LOD, and say paste component values. And now, same thing, grab the mesh renderer, which is probably what I did the first time. Copy component, large LOD, paste this back as component values on top of the mesh renderer here. So we want these to be kind of, the same. This is a wood wall. We've got it set up, but it's no longer a wood wall. It's now a window stone wall. So piece script, we've changed the name, but we didn't change the icon. Quick thing to make icons, okay, is there is a preview generator on the asset store that really helps. So we're going to go out here on the asset store and preview generator and load that. So we should get it. I've downloaded it before. It's free. It's right here. You want the one with a little creepy chrome alien dude. So I'm going to re-download it because this particular project doesn't have it. And by project, I mean Unity project. But since I've downloaded it before, I don't have a download button. I have an import button. So I'm going to import this. We want everything from this particular package. But yeah, creepy metal alien looking guy. So the scene itself, we want a nice little icon. Okay, we want this in a perfect, nice little size. Vanilla Valheim assets use icons in 64 by 64. Helpful hint. We know that by if we click this and we hover above these and we say, show and explore, and we do all this crazy stuff, we can go out here and see that if we hover above this, it says 2048 by 2048. That's because we have it set to have been exported like that in our asset ripper. So all of these are going to be much bigger than they should be, but 64 by 64 is how you're going to quickly accomplish all this stuff. So I'm going to jump back to my prefabs. I'm going to go back in here in pieces, and we're going to grab this one. So pieces, we have our nice little prefab with all of our piece scripts and everything set up. So to quickly make one of these, we can go to Window, right? Preview Generator. That's going to open up this cool window here, and just so it snaps to my screen, we're going to grab this. So if you notice, it says game object to render. It's going to ask for a game object. Don't drag the full game object. In order to get this to work properly, I'm going to have to drag it off my screen for a split second. In order for this to work properly, drag the mesh. Don't grab the game object. But have the prefab open, go here, and then drag the mesh. And we're going to drag the mesh into this. My bad. The mesh layer. Mesh layer, not the actual mesh. And once you get that dragged in, we can open this and look at it. So you can rotate it, and however you rotate it is what your picture looks like. So I want my picture to basically be a front face of this object. Play around with it. I'm going to get it nice and centered, and I'm going to pause the video until I get that. Now that you get this all nice and lined up and perfect, kind of the way you want, you can say save PNG. I would take this back to your Unity asset, so make sure, I luckily have that pinned. So Valheim Modding, HH Valheim, assets, custom items, pieces. I'm going to create a new folder and call it like icons or something, but we can hit save here. We can close this out and load back into Unity. And if we go and look, cross fingers, that should have saved it. Under pieces. Maybe not. Where is it at? Could have swore I hit save on that. All right, so I actually had to click the top bar up here for this to appear, but we want this to actually render not with a black outline. So we're going to switch the texture type to sprite 2D and UI. And then we're going to go ahead and compress this. So as I mentioned, icons can be 64 by 64. We're going to do low quality. Compression is super high. Click apply. So this resizes it to us, or for us, to a 64 by 64. It also makes it 1.8 kilobytes. Super tiny. So we're going to go back to our game object here with our piece, and then you can just drag the icon directly in here. So now we have our own compressed icon. We're not referencing the sprite map, which is 4 megabytes. And we're kind of good to go. So we can edit the script however you want. Place effects. Place effects default have visual effects, place wood wall. I would recommend opening these up and making sure that these look the way they're supposed to look, or putting in your own place effects maybe. So you can double click on the asset in the window here and then click play, and we don't see anything. If we hit restart, that's a good way to see it. We see that it's actually kind of messed up. So although this was set to standard, we're like, oh, well, that should look fine, right? I do recommend hitting unlit and then maybe texture or transparent cutout, and then maybe try and restart. And we see that still looks kind of funny. So we can open this in standard, open up the shader, change from opaque to transparent this way, click restart, and it looks a little bit better, but we're going to switch it to fade. Fade seems to be the one that always makes everything look a-okay. So in this case, we have it set to fade. It looks nice. It looks the way it should look in vanilla. So we're going to go back to our pieces under source, open this back up, and it actually has another visual effects, but that's a sound effect. So I do recommend duplicating this, changing maybe the format to an OGG format, recreating it, adding your own sound effect back. It can be the exact same sound, but find some sites to compress this, make it smaller, because when you do an asset rip of the game, you're getting it in its full runtime size, not necessarily what it came out of in Unity, where it's all compressed and nice. So adding wood as an item drop as a required item, this will also reference the sprite map because wood references the game object. That game object, if you scroll up to the top and you have the item drop, it references a picture that's in the sprite map. So you're still referencing the sprite map in this case. I do recommend if you're bringing in anything super custom that you reference something like that using the ZNet scene in code, not necessarily in Unity. But for this case, we're going to reference it in Unity. We have our comfort. We can set whatever we want. Comfort group, bed, fire tanner. This goes based off of what Valheim has set for our scripts. So default wood walls do not have any kind of, ground only or water piece or clip ground. You would think that it would have some of these, not on floor, on ceiling only. Teleport area. You can say repair piece. Obviously, you can repair walls. Why is this not checked? That's because this doesn't classify as a piece that causes other pieces to repair. So only in biome, you can even create your wall and say, my wall can only be placed in the plains. My wall can only be placed in meadow, swamp, whatever. And you can set all that. Wear and tear script is basically how your object is going to take damage, how much health this object has, and anything else, what damages it's resistant to or even immune to. So your drop downs are normal, resistant, weak, immune, ignore completely, very resistant, or very weak. Very resistant just basically means, yes, I still take damage, but instead of 10 points of damage, I take 1 point of damage type thing. So you can set these, your hit noise, your destroy noise. If I'm not mistaken, these are the distance from the object that someone can actually hear that noise, aside from the player that's actually hitting it. So this would be a synchronized value. So for my health, it's a stone wall. Maybe make this 1,000 instead of 400. So we're going to set these values. We're going to go through and kind of set it how we want. Destroyed effects, same thing. I recommend going in here and finding a visual effect that it references and see if that doesn't look funky. So we're going to hit restart. And if we see this one doesn't really have any kind of issues because it's not really noticeable. So we might not have to edit that one. But we can go back to our game object, set this up however we want, and we're ready to pretty much pull this into the game once we create an asset bundle and reference it. For sake of argument, I'm going to reference it in a asset bundle and bring it into the game via code that we already have. Alrighty, so another thing that we might need to do before we leave is the collider. This whole top half of the wall, pretty much the player would go through if it's not done. So we're going to say the Y value needs to be a little bit taller. And if you notice, it changes everything as far as the box collider here. So the center needs to be a little bit higher. So we can move that. And I got lucky. That pretty much matches. So we've got that set up. We're ready to pull this in. Again, click your prefab. We're going to add this to our test sword tutorial asset bundle, and we're going to rebuild this. So this is going to be loaded into the game more or less the same way as our sword. We're going to use the item manager code for us, and this can help us out. We're going to click Window, Asset Bundle Browser, and same thing. The tutorial sword is now 140 megabytes, and we're going to see the biggest size comes from all of our PNGs and our pictures that we didn't compress. Highly recommend that you do compress these, but for sake of time, I'm not going to. And in the next video, I'm going to show you kind of how to pull this into the game and add it to the hammer.